Hi everyone, it's Drew from the Sewing Labs, and today I'm going to show you how to make some pillowcases that we are using in our annual pillowcase community service project. So in your kit you should have about like 10 to 12 pillowcases, and you're going to have two pieces. You're going to have what I call the cuff, which is this long narrow piece, and we have the body piece, which is this like bigger, wider, longer piece. They should both be the same length. If they aren't, that's okay. I'll show you how we can make that work. So the first step in starting with the pillowcase is going to be attaching the cuff to the body, and we get to do a little fun little trick. Some people call it the burrito method. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So we're going to take our cuff, which is this long piece like this, and we're just going to lay it out in front of us. And then I'm going to take my body piece and I'm going to lay it on top of it. Now, if your cuff has like a directional print on it, we want that facing the top of it so that it comes out the right way when we're sewing. And I'm just going to lay my body piece over top of my cuff, kind of matching up my raw edges of the cuff and the body piece, and I have it out like this. Okay? My next step is I'm going to roll this up, kind of like we're making a burrito. This is our filling, and then it's not really a burrito unless you cover it. Then it's more just like a taco salad, which honestly still is delicious. And then we're going to fold this over to encase our filling. We're going to pretend the cuff is our tortilla. And then what we're going to do is getting all three edges lined up nicely, or close enough at least. You can choose to pin it, or you don't have to, but I'll pin it to show you guys. And you're just going to pin all three layers together, because we're going to be sewing along this long edge, and we want to make sure that everything catches in our seam. Okay, so I have my pillowcase pinned with all my edges lined up, and now we are going to do some sewing. Yay. First of all, we gotta turn our machine on, which mine is. Trust me, I would try doing it with it off. It makes you feel dumb for a second, but it's okay. And then for your thread color, you can use white, you can use a matching color. We aren't too particular, so do what feels right and is easy for you. So we're going to sew along this raw edge, and we are going to sew with just a 3/8 inch seam allowance, which you can measure it out, tape it, mark it, press, whatever you need to, or if you just line up this raw edge of the fabric with the edge of your presser foot and then keep feeding it in there. Most standard domestic sewing machine feet are 3/8 inch wide from the needle to the edge, so that's our little way of measuring without really having to measure. So we're going to start stitching, and we're going to back stitch at the start, because when we have our toss and turn full nights, we don't want our pillowcase to come apart. And then we're just going to sew straight down, and as we get close to our pin, we're going to take it out because we don't want to sew over the pin. We don't want to ruin our sewing machines. And then we're just going to sew this all the way down. If you notice that one edge is getting a little too far over, that's okay. You can adjust it, or just make sure that we're catching all three layers. Okay, so for this next one, we see that our edges are a little bit wider than our cuff, and I want to show you how we can fix that. So we're going to take our pillowcase, we're going to fold it in half. I like to do right sides together, just so that we can kind of protect more of the right side. And then with this folded in half, I'm going to make sure this is all lined up how I want it to. kind of unfold. If you want to press it at this stage, you can. And I see how I have this little bit of overhang. If I line up the cuff nicely, I have this. For how we're finishing the seams, we actually don't want that. That's gonna make our job a little bit more difficult. So what we're going to do is we're just gonna cut off that little bit. So on mine, I need to cut off about like a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to, whatever method works for you to measure and mark off your 1/2 inch, I recommend that you do what you feel comfortable with. And we're gonna go with that. So I'm just gonna cut off this 1/2 inch. I'm using a rotary blade. You can use shears, scissors. I'm just gonna practice good safety. Whatever works. You can use snips, but oh boy, that would be a long time. I'm just gonna cut the rest of this off. Peel this off, and then now our pillowcase matches. And our next step is going to involve some pressing. Okay, so for this next step, we are going to press it out, kind of like I mentioned before. I like to press things on the wrong side of the fabric, just because if, heaven forbid, I accidentally burn something, or it leaves a mark, or there's something sticky on the iron, that way I know it's on the wrong side of the fabric, and that's the sign that like we have a little bit more grace. Ooh, we're steamy today. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start from the body piece, and I am going to just kind of press it forward towards the edge of the cuff. This is going to make the cuff nice and flat and get out some of that bulk and make it look nice and pretty. Oh, we should have done a before and after shot. But if you come look at this, ooh, we're spilling a little water. If we look at this, look at how nice and flat it is. We got a little wavy, but that's okay. So we have this, and now I'm going to just press the rest of this fabric because there was some wrinklage as I was sewing it. And we don't want to have wrinkly pillowcases. So we're going to start with sewing this long edge here and this one at the bottom. We don't want to sew our cuff because then that would close the pillowcase and it would be very difficult to get the pillow in. Not impossible, just more difficult. And again, we're just going to sew at the width of the presser foot, so 3/8 inch. You can pin or use your little clips and clip this. I am not going to, but that's just what I'm more used to. So do what is comfortable and what makes you confident in your sewing abilities. So I'm going to sew. I'm going to make sure my top piece matches up. I'm going to put my presser foot down, and then I'm just going to start sewing. Turn your machine on. That's helpful. I'm back stitch, and then I'm just gonna sew this. And then as we get close to the corner, we're not gonna end the seam, we're gonna pivot. Kind of like what Ross says in Friends, we gotta pivot. For those of you that haven't watched Friends, great show. Okay, so when we get to the corner, I'm going to use my hand wheel and drop the needle into my corner. I'm gonna lift my presser foot, and then using the needle as my little anchor, I'm going to pivot the fabric 90 degrees. And so this way I can keep sewing and I don't have to worry about starting a new seam. and then we'll just back stitch at the end. And we'll tear this off, and I'm going to just trim up my tails so I don't have to worry about that later. And then we are going to give this one more press, and then we'll go and we'll sew the last little bit, and then you will have sewn your very own pillowcase. Yay! Now we're gonna do some pressing, and this is where like we make or break a French seam, is in the pressing. I'm gonna show you a quick way to do it, and it just involves with, we're going to just stitch. We're gonna press right where we just stitched. You may be saying, so didn't Drew have us press the fabric before we did all this? And that is true, I did. But what this does is it sets the stitches in the, oh, that's why it was leaking. This was open. We press the stitches in, because that way it sets it in the fabric where it's nice and tight. It's not kind of sitting above or below, and it takes out any wrinkles that may have come in when you were stitching. So after you have you just press those two seams, we're going to turn our pillowcase wrong side out, and we're going to point out our corners because we want nice pretty corners. So if you need to use, if you can use your finger, if you want to use a crochet hook, a knitting needle, the like handle part of a seam ripper, just don't poke yourself. Whatever works for you to get the nice corner, that's what we're going for. So what we're gonna do next is we want to press this so that the edge of what we just sewed right here is going to be facing out. It's going to be the edge of the seam, and we don't really want it to bubble. So we're going to press it so it kind of looks more like this. We're going to massage it a little bit. That's okay, because guess what? We can probably convince someone to give you a massage. So we're going to start with this. Kind of get it to where you want, to where it's nice and tight. And then you'll give that a little press to set that where you want it. And then you'll kind of just do the same thing for the rest of the seam. And you don't have to get too particular, like don't be like, oh my gosh, this is bubbling out just slightly. Do the best that you can. Whatever you are able to. If you're like, oh, my fingers are tired today, or, you know, something's hurting, or you're like, I'm wearing 2 casts, impressive that you're sewing. If you also can just give it a press after you've turned it inside out, maybe don't worry about the massaging, that will work too. This just helps kind of give it a clean finish, and as long as you press it in some form, that will help give you better results. I just have a few more passes with the iron, and I'll be good to go. Okay, and now it's starting to look like a pillowcase, and we just need to do our last step. So we have it pressed with our edge nice and out. And now we're gonna sew this at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. We just want to do a little bit wider than what we did before because we want to trap that raw edge of the fabric in between the 2 seams that we created. So sometimes if you're like, oh, I want to keep everything within the edge of a presser foot, do like 1/4 inch on that first seam and then sew it at 3/8. There's some flexibility in this project, so do what makes you feel confident and comfortable. So I'm going to sew at a 1/2 inch. I'm starting at the top of the cuff, and we're going to back stitch at the start. And then we're just going to kind of do what we did in that first pass, but just at a slightly wider seam allowance. And again, pin, clip, do what you need to make yourself feel comfortable to sew this. And then just like we did on the first pass, we'll drop the needle and using our hand wheel, we'll pivot, or we'll lift it up and then we'll pivot, and then we'll finish out our seam. And then of course we'll back stitch at the end. And then last but not least, you can cut your tails, but we're going to turn our pillowcase right side out again. And ta-da, we have a beautiful pillowcase that has no raw edge showing. And it just took some pressing and some sewing. And that's how you sew one of these pillowcases that we will then take and donate to some low-income senior housing for this holiday season. And you can pull any, strays you have, cut any, do your own QC if you would like. And that, my friends, is how we sew a pillowcase together.